Boruto's time skip is finally here, guys. We finally have the full translation for Boruto chapter 81, and let's just say it adds way more context to what we discussed in the spoilers yesterday. So we have to get into this. We have more to discuss in regards to Boruto and Kawaki versus Code, and we also have Sarada cursing out the current Hokage. So that part is very interesting and I really want to get into it. So let's start from the top. So it's the same as the spoilers. We have Boruto on the cover in a double spread panel and it looks really good. But we already discussed Boruto's time skip design already, so let's move on to Sarada's. Now in this chapter we got Sarada's full design in color and it's kind of referencing and giving Akatsuki themes, you know, the red and black and all that jazz, and how she's wearing the jacket itself is kind of referencing Itachi. So I see exactly what they're going for here, and the design itself looks good. It looks really neat. But one thing I will say is that I'm not really a fan of the boots themselves. I think she would have looked way better with the boots Naruto had as the Hokage, those black sleek boots. So I think that would have looked way better with this design, but I think it's fine. It looks cool, you know, it looks fine. But when we move on to the dialogue itself, it says, in the village of Konoha, which has undergone the great cataclysm in the past, in front of the Hokage's room, Sarada stands with a disgruntled face. Then we see Sarada saying, I've explained it to you many times, right? Why won't you understand? And then it reveals Shikamaru and Konohamaru, and apparently Shikamaru is the current Hokage as he is wearing the Hokage cloak. Now this part is very interesting, but I do think he's the best person for the job. He has the most experience working with Naruto. He's not the strongest person in the village, but you don't need to be the strongest to be the Hokage, I will say. So I don't really have a problem with it. Although I think his personality is way different from Naruto's. He's more of a Danzo type character. So I will say that Danzo would have been very happy to know that Shikamaru is the current Hokage. That's what I will say. But Shikamaru replied saying that that's my line, Sarada. We were close, but he crossed the line. To make matters worse, he's a Hokage killer. He's a traitor who is trying to kill Kawaki. He won't escape my punishment. So as you guys all know, Eida used Omnipotence to switch Boruto and Kawaki, so everyone thinks Kawaki is Boruto and Boruto is Kawaki. So everyone is after the current Boruto who's no longer in the village, so that's what they're referring to. Now Sarada then replies saying, I'm saying that the original premise is wrong. Boruto isn't the type of person to kill the seventh. At least give him a chance to explain. Now Konohamaru replied saying that if he was innocent, why did he run? There's also information from Eida's clairvoyance. Sarada then says, anyone would run if they're targeted by a kill on sight order. I beg you to take it back. Please just listen to him. But Shikamaru isn't really siding with Sarada. He doesn't really believe her due to Omnipotence. So he's saying that the sanctions against Boruto will remain as they're in accordance with the regulations of the village. And he basically says that no matter what he orders, it won't convince the villagers themselves, because the villagers are in fact against Boruto as well. Obviously they are also affected by Omnipotence. But Sarada is very heated here. She calls them a fool and Konohamaru tries to call her down, and then Shikamaru says, Sarada, I'm worried about you. If you keep this up, you'll forever be a Genin, unable to be Hokage. And I have to say that I love this response from Sarada. She says, is it because my father is a traitor too, just like Boruto? And Shikamaru replied saying, it has nothing to do with Sasuke. This is about what you should do as a shinobi from the Hidden Leaf village. So one thing this does confirm is that Sasuke is probably still alive. They aren't acting as if Sasuke is dead, just that he's not in the village and he's a traitor just like Boruto. So Sasuke fans can relax. Sasuke is probably still alive. But what I loved about this is that in response to what Shikamaru just said, Sarada said, Lord Seventh, which is Naruto, brought back my father who had left the village and committed a felony, and Lord Seventh became Hokage despite being a Genin. My example is Lord Seventh, not you. And this is insane, bro. This is a wicked burn to Shikamaru, although I will say Shikamaru isn't really wrong, because she has to understand that he's under the effects of Omnipotence. So he isn't really at fault here. You can understand why he's saying what he's saying, but the burn itself is still hot, you know. It's still hot. So I loved what she said and it's very funny, but let's move on. Now this skipped over to Naruto and Hinata being in the Daikokuten dimension, or Daikokuten, whatever you want to call it, and it shows that Kawaki is able to access this dimension using his powers. Now of course this is a new design for Kawaki. It looks very different from the one we got in episode 1 for the time skip period. Now obviously this might change to the one he had in episode 1, but it is possible that this is the permanent design change for Kawaki, but we'll have to just wait and see. Now when it comes to power scaling, right, everyone is saying that Kawaki has inaccessible speed, which I went over in the spoiler review itself, because Kawaki is able to move in this dimension where time doesn't flow. So just to simplify this, inaccessible speed means you're able to move distances in 0 time without the aid of teleportation. So basically moving instantaneously without instantaneous teleportation. So they're basically saying that Kawaki is one of the fastest, if not the fastest character in fiction itself. This includes DC and all that jazz. Now obviously this isn't the correct way to interpret what is happening here. Obviously Kawaki is just immune to the effects of his own dimension because it's his ability. It would make sense that he's able to access the dimension but get frozen in time while accessing the dimension. So the logical interpretation is that it just doesn't affect him since it's his ability. Now people are using the argument that Kaguya was affected by her gravity dimension while also excluding the fact that she wasn't affected by the ice dimension. She was still able to move, unlike Naruto and Sasuke. And we have multiple instances in Naruto itself where a character isn't affected by their ability, like the Infinite Tsukunomi, the caster isn't affected, and also Sasuke using Chidori and all that jazz, and also the Raikage wearing the lightning cloak. So it's clear that you have abilities in the universe that don't affect the person. The exception doesn't make the rule, and the exception would have been Kaguya being affected by the gravity dimension. That isn't the rule, it's the exception. And one thing I will say is that Ishiki's dimension here seems to be just a pocket dimension similar to the Kamyu dimension Obito and Kakashi use, that are only accessible by their specific dojutsus. But then you have Kaguya's dimensions that appear to be worlds by themselves. They have stars, satellites, moons in the sky. They aren't a pocket dimension, they're living planets. So I think there's a big difference with Ishiki's dimension and Kaguya's dimension. So I don't think they're comparable in any way. No, I don't want the power scalers to get angry saying that I'm saying Kaguya is stronger. I'm just saying that Ishiki's dimension is more about hacks and not about space. There are different types of dimension. Ishiki's dimension is still better and more powerful because once you enter it, it's game over. You're literally frozen in time forever. So saying that I'm nerfing Ishiki because I'm saying it's a pocket dimension is a little bit ridiculous. So I'm just giving it how it is and you guys can take it or leave it. So let's move on. Now then we finally see Sarada and Sumire walking through the village, and we have Sumire's design. She looks like a regular schoolgirl, and as I said in the spoilers themselves, I think Sarada's boots should have been substituted for Sumire's boots. Of course you still include the red accents around the top of the boots and the bottom of the boots as well to bring off the overall design, but it isn't really that important. I'm just giving my opinion about the design. Okay, it's fine, we can move on. Now in regards to the dialogue itself, it seems very interesting. So Sumire seems to be more understanding of the situation, so she's saying that she shouldn't blame Shikamaru. Almost everyone has been changed by Omnipotence and they don't realize it. In fact, in their eyes it was us who have changed, and this makes perfect sense. So that's why I'm saying we shouldn't blame Shikamaru, because to them and the entire planet, Sumire and Sarada are the weird ones. They're the ones that have changed, not them. And then Sumire says Lord Seven's son is Uzumaki Boruto. For them it was a fact from the start, it was an obvious fact. So I'm pretty sure Kishimoto saw the videos online and the discourse themselves around the topic and said, okay cool, I'm going to explain why this makes sense. And he's just explaining that the jutsu is so strong that their perception of reality has changed. So even if they see a picture of baby Boruto, they're just going to see that picture as Kawaki. They're going to see Kawaki's image as Kawaki Uzumaki. I would even go as far as to say that if they run a blood test on Kawaki and Naruto, the results would show as positive. That's how strong the jutsu is. So that's basically what they're explaining here. But Sarada then replied saying that Boruto has been reversed as an outsider who betrayed them all, an ungrateful traitor. At first they felt it contradicted everything. Kawaki was born and raised in the village and had a body remodeled by Kara. What happened to Momoshiki? Every time I brought up Kawaki with Shikamaru. And she then says that Omnipotence has slowly erased the uneasiness from their mind. They're now completely brainwashed and they don't have any doubts anymore. Its power is ridiculous, how can we face it? So this part is very interesting because based on what she's saying here, they had doubts initially, so that means the jutsu wasn't perfect, but apparently the jutsu is still running. It's a continuous thing. It wasn't like a genjutsu that it's done and you're just in it forever. It's like a continuous genjutsu that's trying to alter reality consistently and it's looking for flaws in the jutsu itself to correct them. So even if someone discovers a contradiction, the jutsu will correct it immediately. That's pretty insane. But we then moved on to the jutsu's caster, who is Eida, and she's there with Damon as well. Now they're pretty much the same in regards to design. I think Eida has a different blouse, but Damon is pretty much the same. What I find interesting is that Damon looks the same height, and I think we can excuse Eida because she was pretty much in her teens already, but Damon was about 10 or 8 and he's pretty much the same height. He hasn't grown in any way, and I find it interesting because this could be in relation to them being cyborgs, but then again you have Kawaki who's also a cyborg in some way. ways, but he has grown, so I think it might be in relation to Shibai's cells. I think that's very possible, although it could just be something normal as Damon just being, a small person. So, we'll see. But we see that Sumire and Sarada is basically confronting Eida on the ability itself, and Eida is saying that it's nearly impossible to reverse it, and Eida is saying that just like my charm Omnipotence, recently I was finally able to get it and understand more about this ability. Now I was a bit confused in the spoilers because it seems like they were just having this conversation, but based on the dialogue here, it seems like this is something they've talked about before, and the reason why Sarada is asking her about it is because Eida said that she learned more about the ability. So it's not that they're just having this conversation, it's just like new information being given. So she said that, did you learn anything new about the technique? And Eida says, what I know is that Omnipotence is a shinjutsu from the Otsutsuki. It's an ability that realizes your wish and turns it into reality. This situation was created by Kawaki's wish. What changed is everyone's memory. The memory that everyone knows about Kawaki and Boruto was overwritten. As a result, their positions were switched. Now we already knew this as an audience, but Sarada wasn't relayed this information. Although I will say that Boruto could have done this because he can just enter the village and leave. I think it's possible. And another thing I will say is that Boruto told Eida this the same day it happened, when he was on the rock with Sasuke. So it's weird that she's saying that this is what she now learned, because she should have known this before, because Boruto explained it to her after Momoshiki explained it to him. So this dialogue is a little bit weird here. Now Sarada replied saying that there must be a way to turn things back, and Eida says, I don't know. Even if we let everyone know about Omnipotence, no one would understand it. And I made a comment in the spoiler review itself saying that maybe Sarada didn't explain it correctly to Shikamaru, that's why I didn't understand. And they basically like debunked this in this chapter, because she says it's something that can be understood if you just explain it correctly, right? And Eida says, think again. You guys would be the only ones that would be accused of having the wrong memory. And this makes sense because they're under the effects of Omnipotence. She then says, frankly speaking, it would be better if you guys just give up on returning things back to how they were. Rewriting a new memory is realistic only if you are willing to assume the risk. Now this is very interesting because Eida is giving them an out. She's basically saying that what we can do is rewrite a new memory. They can't return it to what it was, but they can try to rewrite a new memory using Omnipotence. And I think this is very obvious. Like if you don't know how to reverse it by implanting the correct memories in everyone. That should be very simple if Eida knows how to control the ability. So there is a way, although there could be like a clause in the ability itself. I say clause for the lack of a better word, but it makes sense. The clause could be that you can't overwrite something that you did using Omnipotence. So that is also possible. So we'll have to just wait and see if that works out. Now what's interesting here is that Eida then says it's so strange why both of you aren't affected even though neither of you are Otsutsuki. And she then says that Omnipotence won't work on Otsutsuki, neither will her charm ability. It also won't work on Damon, who shares her bloodline. But you girls were different. Why are you able to have past memories? And then she asks the big question, are you two really charmed by me? So she's making the connection that if they aren't affected by Omnipotence, they probably aren't affected by the charm ability either. And Sumire and Sarada start to basically sweat here, so it seems like this is the first time Eida has confronted them on that. So I find that very, very weird, because it seems like they've had this conversation before, but she's just confronting them on why. But maybe Eida just wasn't interested, I guess. That's the only explanation I can see. But then like Sumire and Sarada start to remember that Shikamaru told them that they shouldn't let Eida find out that they aren't affected by the charm ability, because they're the only ones capable of killing Eida aside from Boruto and Kawaki. And this makes sense, since if Damon knows, he's probably gonna flip out and murk them. So he's kind of unstable, and apparently he still is after 3 years. So Sumire basically jumps in and explains that they're still affected by the charm ability and captivated by Eida. So Eida then says okay cool and moves on. But Damon is so weird, bro, because he's just giving them that look even after that moment. So I think something might go down between Sarada and Damon. We'll have to just wait and see. We then move over to Kawaki and Mitsuki, and we finally see Mitsuki's full design. It looks pretty plain, it's pretty simple, but it looks pretty cool at the same time. And we see that Kawaki is telling Mitsuki not to let out his murderous intent like that because it makes it hard to breathe. And Mitsuki replied saying, even now Boruto is still trying to kill you. He also has the same Otsutsuki ability ability as you, so he's able to erase his chakra. But Kawaki then replied saying that even if Boruto comes to the village, I'll read his presence. Even if he can escape the sensory team, he can't fool my eyes. You understand that, right? And this is very interesting because in the spoilers, they made it seem like Kawaki was using an ability, using his eyes, but I think it's very similar to how Boruto could still sense Kawaki even after he erased his chakra signature back in part 1. So I think that is what he's referring to here. But Mitsuki then replied saying that I just want to protect you, I'll definitely kill him with my own hands. And Kawaki then just dissed Mitsuki out of nowhere. He says that that's up to you, do as you like. Wandering around and following me like a creep is such a pain in the ass for me. And for just a moment, it seemed like it kinda disturbed Mitsuki in some way, so I find that very interesting. But Kawaki then got a dispatch call saying that they found some claw marks from Code, and he pretty much started to levitate and just flew away. So apparently Kawaki now has the ability to fly, and probably Boruto as well since they're both Otsutsuki. But as I said before, Mitsuki looked pretty disturbed by Kawaki's comments, and he said, "You are the sun that illuminates a moon like me. Isn't that right, Kawaki?" And I can't confirm this, but I have some feeling that Mitsuki isn't affected by omnipotence to the degree of everyone else. I think that's very possible. Now this is also somewhat implied here because we moved over to Himawari kind of sparring with Chocho, and Chocho looks the same, she just looks bigger. Himawari has gotten taller, she has like a new design and a different hairdo and all that jazz. Pretty basic stuff, they're just like sparring here, right? But after the sparring is finished, we see Shikadai and Inojin move over to both of them saying that Himawari is doing good and all that jazz. And they pretty much asked her why she decided to become strong. And she says, rather than wanting to be strong, you know, if I say this, everyone in the village would probably scold me. And she then says, I want to help Boruto, which shocked Shikadai because again, they're under omnipotence and believes that Boruto killed Naruto and all that jazz and he's after her brother who is supposed to be Kawaki. So they're pretty shocked by this and they're saying that what she's talking about, stop joking around. And she then said, sorry, this must have surprised you, but how can I put it? His image inside my head is different. And Shikadai reminded her that she killed her father. And she then replied that she thinks that is wrong. Maybe. She then says, he's the one who protected my father and I with his life. That kind of person wouldn't kill my father. There must be a reason behind it. If that is so, right now Boruto is in trouble. She then says that she can feel it, her father is probably still alive somewhere. So based on this specific dialogue, it appears that Himawari is in fact affected by omnipotence, but it's kind of wavering to some degree because she's saying that maybe this is the case, maybe not, but she does believe that he did something. She does believe that Kawaki is Boruto and Boruto is Kawaki, but she doesn't believe that Boruto did what they're saying Boruto did. So she is affected, but to a certain degree. And this is probably due to her Otsutsuki lineage. I've done multiple videos on this saying that she has a direct link to the Otsutsuki through Naruto, who's a descendant of Hagoromo, and Hinata, who's a descendant of Hamura. So she has a direct link to the Otsutsuki by blood and genetics. So I think that might be why she's feeling this way to some degree. But also what I found very funny, and maybe it shouldn't be funny, but no one mentioned Hinata. They're like, he killed your father, and she's like, maybe my father is still alive. What about your mother? You know, like, she also died, right? She's also missing? Like, no one cares? That's pretty sad, I'm just saying, bro. But moving on. We then see Kawaki using his dojutsu to shrink Code's claw marks. So apparently he just goes around the village looking for the claw marks and just shrinks them using his dojutsu. What's interesting here is that Kawaki has 8 spokes or 8 triangles. So he has Ishiki's full dojutsu at this point in time because in the pre-time skip he only had 4 triangles. So apparently he's full power at this point, and he's possibly even Ishiki level. You know, that's very possible, but it could be that the karma doesn't allow them to tap into the full power, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now we also found a claw mark on one of the villagers, so apparently he's able to sense Code's chakra itself because he was on the dude's back under his clothing and he was able to sense it, and he shrank it and all that jazz and moved on. So apparently Code is trying to enter the village through the villagers themselves, which is exactly what ended up happening later on. So we see that Code's claw grimes entered the village using one of the claw marks on one of the villagers' back. So these are the things he created using the 10 tails and his power merged together, so they should be pretty strong. Although I will say they're not as strong as Code by any means whatsoever because they only have a small portion of his chakra, and they also aren't a 10 tails level being because they only have a small portion of the 10 tails chakra. So these guys should be strong, but I think people kind of overhype their power because based on what we saw in this chapter, Kawaki is basically able to like one-shot them with just a regular hit in base, and Sarada herself is able to just one-shot them with a basic kick in her base form. She isn't using the Sharingan either. So they are strong, but apparently not that strong. Or maybe Sarada is just really strong. we'll just have to wait and see. Now I will say that the initial spoilers said that Sarada overpowered Code, but that doesn't happen at any point in this chapter, so that was just false. So everyone was saying that Sarada is above Jigen level, which isn't the case at all per this chapter. Now that might end up being the case in the upcoming chapters, but this chapter doesn't indicate that at all. So we can move on. Now one thing to point out is that Kawaki is actively protecting the village. He's actively protecting the villagers. He cares about them, I think, to some degree. So I think this kind of flies in the face of what we saw in the Timeskip preview, with everyone thinking that Kawaki is the one who destroyed the village. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's going to be Code. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because Kawaki might change his mind later on and he might be the one who destroyed the village. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as I said before, the claw marks are basically placed on the villagers so that Code can enter the village. But the claw marks are also on the clawgrams themselves, and they're basically able to enter the village through other clawgrams, and we see this to be the case in this specific chapter. But in addition to that, Code also entered the village using one of his clawgrams in front of Sarada. And Code pretty much looks the same. He got a new design in the last half of Boruto Part 1, so I didn't expect them to give him a new one for the Timeskip. But he looks the same, looks like he got a little bit taller, maybe. But he's basically greeting Sarada and all that jazz, similar to what Jigen did to Naruto when he entered the village. But what's interesting about Code's design is that he now has one eye. So he also has a slash on his left eye, similar to how Boruto has a slash on his right eye. Now what I believe happened here is either two things, one of two things. Either Code tried to peek using one of his clawgrams that he sent to find Boruto, and Boruto slashed his eye, or maybe Sasuke did. Or maybe Code himself fought Boruto and lost the eye directly to Boruto. But based on the dialogue in this chapter, he says he's looking for Boruto. Sarada says he's not in the village he left over 3 years ago. He says he knows that he has been chasing Boruto down for the past 2 years. So it seems like he maybe fought Boruto over 2 years ago after he left the village, based on what he's saying here, but we might be interpreting the dialogue incorrectly, so we'll just have to wait and see. He then said that he stopped looking for Boruto and thought he'd call him here to this village so he can visit his former friend, who harbors a deep regret for him. So he's basically planning on using Sarada to lure Boruto to the village, and we see that the clawgrams are starting to surround Sarada and she looks a bit worried. Now this might not be that Sarada is weak enough to be destroyed by the clawgrams. She's just probably just concerned about Code himself being there. So I'm not going to say that she can't beat 4 clawgrams, okay? Code is the big threat and that's probably what she's worried about. But Code then said, let out your scream so it will reach him. And then we see Boruto appear standing directly on Code's face, and that's pretty insane because he's literally disrespecting the main antagonist of his manga on the first chapter of the Timeskip. So Code stocks are really down, bro. I'm just saying, bro has 0 W's in the entire franchise, maybe beating base Boruto, you know, probably in part 1, but bro's just getting assaulted. He's just getting assaulted, and even on the first chapter of the Timeskip, he's getting assaulted. I don't think they like this dude, bro. I don't think Kishimoto likes him, you know. But maybe Code is the protagonist. He's actually the protagonist and Boruto is the villain. So we'll see how this plays out. But we get this cool panel of Sarada looking up to Boruto and Boruto looking down on Code, saying those disgusting ideas are why women want to get away from you. And Code tries to attack him using his claws and shit, but Boruto just dodges it. And then we see Kawaki notices that Boruto is in the village, and so does Shikamaru and the sensory team. So apparently Boruto didn't try to hide his chakra signature from everyone. And we see that Eida is able to see this as well. She's using her Senringan. And we see that Shikamaru is basically giving orders for everyone to focus on the clawgrams and just keep an eye on Boruto. So I find this dialogue very weird because if he's really worried about Boruto, he would have sent some people after Boruto. So it's somewhat implied that Shikamaru isn't fully sold on Omnipotence. Maybe just playing the long game here, and maybe he's like working behind the scenes to see what's going on. Or it could be that he just doesn't feel like they're up to the par to fight Boruto, so it doesn't make sense to send them after him. So I think either one of the two things could make sense. But then we get a great panel of Boruto standing in front of Sarada, which looks pretty cool. And Sarada is like looking on to Boruto. She hasn't seen him in a very long time probably. And then we get the last panel showing Code, Kawaki, and Boruto. And Kawaki said, you finally appeared, Boruto. And that's where it ends. Now this part is very interesting to me because based on how Boruto appeared on top of Code, like no one sensed him. Now it could be a speed feat because we know Boruto can fly, so he probably just flew there very fast and landed on Code's face. Or it's possible that maybe Boruto just teleported. Maybe he used the Jogan's ability, who knows. I really hope not, because I really wanted to see Boruto activate the Jogan in real time in a chapter, so hopefully that's not the case and he just speed blitz Code. But if that's the case, Code is pretty weak, bro. I will say he's pretty weak, even though he isn't in his karma state, so he's just in base Code form. But Boruto also appears to be in base as well, no Jogan showing and also no karma seal activated. But Boruto is 100% Otsutsuki unlike Code, so I will say that Boruto is probably getting power from the karma seal without needing to activate the karma seal itself, similar to how he was able to use Momoshiki's Byakugan without needing to activate the karma seal. So maybe that's what's happening here, because it's very interesting if Boruto is stronger than Code at this point in time, because Code is supposed to be someone that greatly surpassed Jigen. So where did Boruto get this power from absent of the karma seal and the Jogan? That's pretty weird. It's a pretty insane power cliff if that's what happened. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts on the chapter itself. Do you think this lived up to the hype of Boruto's time skip, you know? Do you think it made sense? Do you think it's kind of rushed? I feel like they're kind of moving pretty fast, but it's not really a problem to me, to be honest. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Drop a like if you like the video and subscribe for more Boruto content. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.